You step off a ship into the Virginia heat, June of 1607. The air smells sweet, like flowers and river mud. The gentlemen around you are wearing wool doublets, because nobody told them what August feels like here. You look at the water. It's wide and calm and shining. You're going to drink that water. And that decision, more than the wolves, more than the arrows, more than the winter, is what's going to kill you. Because every American colony had its own signature way of ending your life. 13 colonies, 13 different deaths. And the safest one is not the one you'd guess, so let's take the tour. Where you land determines how you die. We start before the famous colonies, with the one that didn't die so much as evaporate. In 1587, about 115 English men, women, and children landed on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what's now North Carolina. Their governor, John White, sailed back to England for supplies. A war with Spain kept him away for 3 years. When he finally returned in 1590, everyone was gone. Not dead. Gone. No bodies, no graves, no burned buildings. Just one word carved into a post. Croatoan. To this day, nobody knows for certain what happened to them, though tree ring evidence published in 1998 shows they'd landed at the start of the worst drought in 800 years, which is the kind of luck that follows this whole story around. So if you're a Roanoke colonist, your cause of death is officially a shrug. The colonies that came next would keep much better records of their dying, starting with the one that turned it into a science. Jamestown, Virginia, 1607. This is the colony from the cold open, and here's what nobody told you on the ship. The peninsula the settlers chose looked perfect for defense. It was also a tidal swamp. The river water was brackish, half salt, and in summer the current slowed, and the colony's own waste just sat there, drifting gently back and forth past the fort. The men drank it anyway. What else were they going to drink, so the killers at Jamestown weren't dramatic? They were typhoid, dysentery, and salt poisoning, which starts with swelling and lethargy and ends with you dying quietly in a hot wooden building while everyone around you is too sick to notice. Of the roughly 104 who landed in 1607, only 38 were alive by the start of 1608. 2 out of 3 dead inside a year, mostly from the water. And that was the good period. In the winter of 1609 to 1610, the starving time, the colony went into a siege with several hundred people and came out in spring with about 60, having eaten the horses, the dogs, the rats, the leather, and, as the bones of a 14-year-old girl found by archaeologists in 2013 confirm, at least one of the dead. Virginia would eventually get rich on tobacco. But the dying didn't stop, it just got organized. Because here's how death worked in the Chesapeake once the colony stabilized. Virginia and its neighbor Maryland ran on indentured servants, poor English migrants, who traded 4 to 7 years of labor for passage. And there was a word waiting for them when they arrived: seasoning. Your first year in the Chesapeake was a trial by disease: malaria, typhoid, dysentery. You either survived it, seasoned like meat, or you didn't. By some estimates, as many as half of indentured servants died before their contracts ended, which meant the master got the labor and never had to pay out the freedom dues. A dead servant was, in strictly accounting terms, a discount. In the 17th century Chesapeake, a white man's life expectancy was around 43 years. A quarter of children died in infancy, and roughly another quarter never saw 20. Most children buried at least one parent before they stopped being children. So surely you're thinking it's worse up north, New England? The place with actual winter, rocky soil, short growing season, snow that could bury a house. That has to be the death capital. It starts out looking that way. The Mayflower lands in November 1620, which is a bold month to arrive anywhere in Massachusetts, with about 102 passengers. That first winter, cold, scurvy, and disease killed roughly half of them. Of the 18 married women aboard, only a handful lived to spring. Textbook colonial catastrophe. But then something strange happens, and it's the part nobody expects. New England becomes the healthiest place in the entire English-speaking world. Healthier than England itself. The cold that nearly killed the Pilgrims also killed the mosquitoes. The water ran clear out of rocky hills instead of pooling in warm swamps. Settlers arrived as whole families and spread out into small farming towns instead of packing into port cities. A man who reached adulthood in 17th century New England could expect to live to around 70, 27 years longer than his counterpart in Virginia in the same century, on the same coast, under the same king. New England is arguably where the American grandparent was invented, because it was the first place in the colonies where 3 living generations of one family became normal instead of a marvel. So in New England, the swamp isn't coming for you. The winter, after that first one, mostly isn't either. In New England, the thing you have to survive is your neighbors. In 1692, in Salem, Massachusetts, the healthiest colonists in the world, with their long lives and their full stomachs and their abundant free time, used some of that time to hang 19 people for witchcraft. A 20th, an 81-year-old farmer named Giles Corey, refused to enter a plea, so the court pressed him to death under stones over 2 days. Several more died in jail. Nobody was burned. That's a European detail we imported into the memory later. The witch panic eventually collapsed, the judges apologized, and Massachusetts went back to being statistically excellent at staying alive. Which brings us to the question this whole tour has been building toward. If the deadliest colony isn't starving Jamestown and it isn't frozen Plymouth, where is it? Here's the answer, and it's the darkest one on the map. The deadliest colony in British North America was also the richest, and it was rich because it was deadly. South Carolina. The Low Country around Charleston was, in the words of one historian, the deadliest disease region on the North American mainland. An 18th century saying sometimes attributed to a European visitor, called Carolina in the spring a paradise, in the summer a hell, and in the autumn a hospital. The land was low, hot, and wet, perfect for growing rice, and perfect for the mosquitoes that carried malaria and yellow fever. In 1697 and 1698, smallpox killed an estimated 300 people in Charleston, out of a population under 5,000. Fevers came back almost every year. Wealthy planters fled their own plantations every summer because staying home in August was understood to be a gamble with your life. And this is where the story stops being about weather. Because the rice that made Carolina the wealthiest colony on the mainland was grown by enslaved Africans. In flooded fields, in the exact conditions the planters were fleeing, the colony imported West African farmers specifically for their rice-growing knowledge, worked them in standing water through the fever season, and replaced the ones who died with more ships. Within a few decades of its founding, South Carolina had a black majority, the only mainland colony where that was true. The plantation didn't run despite the death rate. The death rate was priced in. In South Carolina, dying wasn't a risk of the business model. It was the business model. That fact was so visible, so undeniable, that it inspired the last of the 13 colonies to try to design death out entirely. Georgia, founded in 1733 by James Oglethorpe, is remembered as a debtor's colony, a dumping ground for men out of English prisons. That's a myth, and it's almost exactly backwards. Oglethorpe had campaigned against debtors' prisons, and the idea began there. But the trustees interviewed and vetted every applicant, and among the first shipload of settlers, roughly 114 people, there were essentially no released debtors at all. What Georgia actually was an experiment, a colony with no slavery. Banned by law in 1735, the only British colony to do that. No rum, which Oglethorpe blamed for the sickness killing his settlers. No large estates. Every man on his own small farm, healthy, sober, and ready to fight the Spanish in Florida, because Georgia was also a military buffer protecting those rich Carolina rice fields. It was the closest thing colonial America ever had to a public health policy. It lasted about 18 years. The settlers looked across the Savannah River at Carolina planters getting spectacularly rich, and they wanted in. The rum ban failed almost immediately. The slavery ban was overturned by mid-century, and Georgia promptly became a rice colony too, fevers and all. The one colony designed so you wouldn't die like the others chose. On reflection, to die like the others. It paid better. So where should you have gone? The honest answer is the boring one, the middle. Pennsylvania, founded in 1681, was known in the period as the best poor man's country in the world, and the nickname was earned. Fertile soil, a healthier climate than the Chesapeake, William Penn's policy of actually paying the Lenape for land, which kept the frontier quieter than Virginia's for decades, and a port at Philadelphia that made ordinary farmers prosperous. New York and New Jersey ran cooler and drier than the South, too. You could still die of smallpox in any colonial city, and epidemics rolled through the ports every few years. But if a recruiter in a London tavern offered you your pick of 13 destinations, the correct answer was Philadelphia, and it wasn't particularly close. So here's the full map of your deaths. Roanoke erases you. Virginia poisons you with its own river and then starves you. The Chesapeake seasons you and buries you at 43. Plymouth freezes you once, then lets you live to 70. Unless the town decides you're a witch. South Carolina sells your death as a line item, and Georgia tries to save you for 18 years before deciding wealth was worth more. Notice what's missing from that list. Almost nobody in this story is killed by the things the paintings show. The wolves, the battles, the dramatic frontier. The great killers of colonial America were a cup of water and a mosquito, which is worth remembering the next time you fill a glass from the tap without looking at it. That glass of clean water, the one you didn't think about at all, is the single greatest survival technology your ancestors never had. They crossed an ocean, and the ocean was the safe part.